Welcome everyone. Today I would like to speak about a very specific topic, which I believe is quite crucial in sprint planning and retrospective, is that how we can adopt design thinking in sprint planning and also in retro. To start with, I would like to make sure that you know what's defines design thinking. So if you, as you can see on the slide, so design thinking is the human-centered iterative approach to problem solving that emphasizes understanding user needs and creating innovative solutions through the structured process. From the left side of the slide, you can see actually how it works. So then there's some stages of it, like emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And it's going obviously in loops. So that's how we have continuous improvement process. To find out a bit more about each of them, let's go to the next slide. So over here, as far as you can see, you can relate each phase to the certain understanding of what's in there. So first phase is emphasize. So it means understands user deeply, their goals, frustrations, and behavior. So in other words, we need to understand our users as much as we can. So then we can make it user-centered approach to tackle their problems. On the next step, we need to clearly define the real problem, not something which we assumed, but something which is really going to help them to solve any situation which they have. On the next step, we need to generate as many solutions as possible, and we don't judge them early, so like they're complete or half complete, or something which is going like on a very initial stage. But we need to make sure that solutions are there, and we slowly work on each of them, because it's continuous improvement. The next step is prototype. Is obviously to create something cheap, fast representation of the ideas. So our main goal is to fail cheap. So it means even if it doesn't work, we don't use much of the resources and we keep going. But even if we're already considering something, it gives us something to think about and something to work on. And the last one, we obviously need to test and validate our assumptions with the real users, because the real users is the one who going to be using at the end the features which we producing. Let me give you an example of how does it work. So first, let's make a task as to build the banking payment application, right? So on the first stage, as I emphasize, you observe how the customers using banking app. So what challenge them, what they like, what they don't like, what in terms of features. Most importantly, it should be like a survey. It should be real problems, right? On the next step, we need to define what they really want. So we want to like in this case, users want to have like robust payment option, which will allow to send money in seconds. Again, keyword in seconds. It means we know that they need something fast, and that's what we gonna be delivering to them. The next step is we're gonna do the make one tap payment solutions or QR code peer-to-peer solutions, something which is fast, allow to have peer-to-peer transactions, or something really fast. And we need to create couple of options, obviously, for them to relate to the current banking app. On the next step, we do some sort of like clickable mockups, demo pages, and so on. So like they can test, they can feel how does it work, and so on. And at the same time, so we can actually throw out something which doesn't make sense, and then something which makes sense, we can continuously improve. And then the last one, we just basically do the tests. So like basically we keep working on what works, what's need to be changed, and to find out what's actually going. And then once we find out about that one, then we can have another loop and improve again, again, and again. So now let's consider how we do it in a sprint planning. So in a sprint planning, first stage obviously comes before planning. So we need to understand our users or stakeholders, because stakeholders are also users, right? So we need to understand what they really want. And as an example, for example, it could be review recent users' feedback, support tickets, analytics, and so on. So again, real problems. On the next step, which happening during the sprint planning, so we frame, right? So we need to frame that real problems into certain user stories, which we're gonna work during the sprint on them. So example, it could be like we can rephrase the backlog items as problem statements, align them with a clear sprint goal. So the more clear we're gonna state the problem, the better it's gonna be for the reaching the sprint goal. On the next step, we're gonna do the planning of the how, right? So we need to have multiple options how to actually make this problem go away, right? So then, for example, we can ask ourselves what are the three ways we can solve it, to suggest the developers gonna suggest alternatives and so on. They can always during the sprint come to the product owner, ask him like what we can do differently. Obviously, product owner obviously always going to be up to for new ideas and so on. And then on the next step, we can do the prototype. So it's basically once we uh, do that, we obviously reduce the risk and learn early. So the earlier we learn, the earlier we can make changes, right? So that, for example, it could be feature toggles, deliver partial, what usual increments. Again, we still releasing something. It might be not be full, but it's still something. And then the faster we do it, the faster the end user can react on it, and the faster we can learn and continue the loop. And the final part is the test phase. So basically, obviously, in a sprint review, it basically fits to planning. So everything we need to do in a sprint review, we need to obviously validate, right? So we validate our assumptions, we come up with the conclusions, and then we feed what we already done for the next sprint planning, right? So then we use the feedback, and we always need to ask, did it actually solve the problem, right? So that's about the sprint planning. Now let's quickly talk about the retrospective, right? So same approach could be happening there. So again, for the sprint retro, same thing. Our users, is our team in this case. So we need to understand on the first stage their emotions, their experiences, went right, what was wrong, and so on. So what's the blockers, what the psychological state, and so on. And on the next step, we need to find out and frame, most importantly, what are the real problem, not the symptoms, but what the real problem is. So the real problem is normally we can extract by 5 whys. So because sometimes we need to go deeper because some of the issues might be like superficial, right? And then you still need to go deeper and understand what's actually causing the frustration or the problems or so on. So once we've done that, once we identify, we try to ideate, right? So we need to have some improvement ideas, right? So then we generate multiple, as many as possible. So then we can move on with that, right? So like what could be 3 ways, even if it's small, like stated over here, if it's small, it still change, right? Small steps, incremental steps, they are still a good and better one than not having any. And on the last two, what we do, we need to prove our experiments. So once we find out like what solutions could be, we need to treat these improvements as experiments. We pick, we pick one, we define success criteria, we time box it, we use it on the next sprint, and we have a feedback, right? So then on the next part, so when we test them and we've done it on the next retrospective, we learn and adapt, right? So then we know that something worked, something not, and then we need to understand why it's worked or not, and we also need to clear it out. So we need to understand what we keep, what we change, or what we drop. So that's the reasoning behind both of the uh, events in a sprint using design thinking. Thank you.